Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review the film Chappaquiddick. Now, it took me a couple weeks, but I finally got into the theater to go see this film, and this talks about the infamous part in Ted Kennedy's life where everyone wanted him to run for president. He's the only son of the Kennedy clan left, and he drives into a river and leaves a young woman to die. And this really isn't a story that's been outwardly told in a big sense in a film like this, and I thought it was very interesting to see what they did with this film. And it was considerably more interesting and actually a lot more well crafted than I was expecting, because there's plenty of historical dramas that come out, period pieces, and there's tons of them, and a lot of them are very serviceable. They look great. The production design was very well done in this film. But I think the biggest thing that I could say about this film is there is a lot of craft that goes into this film, including the cinematography done by Maurice Alberti, and the camera work is a lot more, how do I say, inspired in this film in terms of how they use the camera to show certain shots, how to build tension, and how to really tell a lot with just using the camera. And that's the important thing about film. That's the medium that you're using, and use it. Make the most of it. And this film actually does really utilize that. And another big thing that sticks out to me is Garth Stevenson's score. It can be really haunting at moments, especially with its organ work, and I was not expecting that. And there's some scenes that are actually quite haunting in this film, and I appreciated the ways this film tonally set up particular sequences, where obviously this is a historical event and there's certain things that we already know, and certain scenes are set up where you're really building some tension and intensity with the music and how it's shot and how it's edited, and I really appreciated that. And John Kern, the director, does a really good job of bringing this all together. And this film paints Ted Kennedy as a lot more complex character than it could have been. This is just a guy who messed up and is unfairly being all this craziness plopped on him. Or he could have just been, this guy is a murderer and just without guilt just left this woman here. And there's a lot of things dealing with his past, these expectations, and his relationship with his father, which Jason Clarke plays Ted Kennedy in this, and he is fantastic. He really brings his A game, and this is probably the best I've ever seen Jason Clarke, and I hope he gets some attention for this film and start to realize that he can be a lead in films. And then Bruce Dern plays his father, who I'm blanking on if they actually said this in the film. I think he has ALS, but he could barely speak, he could barely move anymore, and Bruce Dern brings such intensity to this performance, and their relationship shines a light particularly on what this man, Ted Kennedy, was going through in his life, and it's complex. It doesn't make an excuse for what he winds up doing, which this film paints him in a pretty particular light in terms of this guy really played the game and really messed up and did some really bad things, and actually acts very childish throughout this film. And that's also another thing, as he's been in the shadow of all of his brothers and not really knowing how to deal with things without his father and his father's people, which you have this balancing act of characters played by Ed Helms and Jim Gaffigan and Clancy Brown, who are all putting their perspectives on things. And Ed Helms does a fantastic job in this film, and he was really great. And I was surprised because I don't have high expectations out of Ed Helms in most performances outside of comedic. And then it was really cool seeing Clancy Brown pop up in this film. And in terms of the writing, this is a really compelling story, an interesting way of how they go about doing this. It does fall into some of the drawbacks of this film, is that the story goes into the back and forth, back and forth. Is he going to do the right thing? Is he going to do the bad thing? Is he going to do the right thing? And it keeps going back and forth. And it does keep you on your toes in terms of what to expect, but it also gets really repetitive after a while. And there's some scenes in this film that are really overly talky, and there's parts of this film that are really talky. And not that it's not interesting, but it kind of pulls the whole film to a halt in terms of how they're working on it. And actually, one other little positive I want to add in, you wouldn't expect like comic relief to be well done in something like this, but the dialogue back and forth between some characters is actually really interesting. And Kate Mara isn't in this film a lot. She's kind of underutilized in this film. She's a very talented actress, and she's kind of just plopped in to get to this point of like, this is this young woman. And there's some parts, especially the scenes where this accident is happening, are very powerful, but she's kind of underutilized and she doesn't get to do a whole lot in this film. Now, overall, I really, really was surprised by Chappaquiddick and how much I really enjoyed this film, and I'm going to give it a B+.